So we've been going through this series the last couple of weeks, and we've been talking about the grace of God for the past couple of weeks. And I won't recap everything that we've done, but I wanted to create, aggregate, pull together a list of things that I felt like would encompass everybody in the room and not in the room as well. And here's the thing about this list that I'm about to read off to you. It could be offensive to you if you're not on it. But if you're not on it at the end of as I talk, at the end of the time that I read this list, I'd love for you to just tell me your own adjective and tell me what describes you. But here's the list that I want to read out to you. What do a bunch of lying, cheating, greedy, covetous, lustful, porn-watching, tax-dodging, racist, jealous, judgmental, lonely, angry people who eat too much, spend too much, drink too much, worry too much, smoke too much, who gather together because they believe Jesus is the light of the world and they need more light? What do you call that? That's a church, right? That's the church. And if I didn't catch an adjective that describes you, I'm really sorry. I meant to, okay? So I meant to capture you in that list in some point. And if I didn't, I'm really sorry I left you out. But that's just, you can take it up with Jesus later. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. People think sometimes that people who go to church never sin or never do anything wrong or think they never do anything wrong. But here's the thing. Those of us who have gone to church for a long time, or those of us who choose to go to church regularly, those sorts of things, we just know we need Jesus so much because we just can't get it right. Can we? We just can't get it right. We're just always messing up in some way. And so if you ever feel like, you mess up a lot, congratulations. Welcome to the human race. And we want to help you understand that grace is good and needed. And if you wanted everything to be fair in life, guess what? You wouldn't like it when you got it, because fairness actually hurts those who aren't perfect. And guess what? All of us aren't perfect, right? So anyways, we just kind of been talking about that stuff, and that's kind of a snapshot of the people of the church. Another thing that's really interesting is sometimes people think that the church is like a building, a location, or a person, or a single person's opinion. For instance, some people think that they say this kind of stuff. The church should take a stand, right? The church should take a stand. And what really is behind that is usually the person who's saying that is actually saying, the church should take my stand, whatever my stand is. Or what they're really saying is the pastor should take my stand and talk about it in front of a bunch of people, and therefore everyone will know that's what we think as a gathering, as a group of people. And the problem with that is we're very diverse, and we don't all share all the same stands. In fact, some people think that the church agrees on everything, and we don't agree on everything. We agree on basically two things. And that's about it. Everything else is sort of like, well, yeah, I kind of think this and I kind of think that. But here's kind of what we believe, that God sent Jesus to save us from sin and from ourselves. That's number one. And number two, now we are responsible to extend grace to each other and others, what God freely extended to us, grace. So number one, God sent Jesus to save us. Number two, we need to share that. We need to extend grace to other people. Those are basically the two major things that we agree on. And a lot of other stuff is kind of like, yeah, I kind of think this and I kind of think that, and okay. But we agree on those two things. So that's kind of where our unity forms. That's where we come together and agree. I mean, really what happens is someone may say, I have a real personal issue with this person in the church, this person in the church, this person in the church. And it may be based on what kind of news they watch, what kind of political party they subscribe to, or what they think about certain issues. And I can certainly understand all those disagreements, but that's not at the core of what unifies us, because we're not centered around politics. Though they're important, we're not centered around that. We're centered around the grace of Jesus. So I just want to let you know that there's a lot of room for grace in this room and in all of our gatherings. That's why we're talking about this. It's so important. In fact, grace is kind of like the oil in the machine. You know what I'm talking about? It's that thing that kind of relieves the tension whenever the machine is working, whatever the machine is for you. It's a relationship, it's a discussion, it's a disagreement, it's a misunderstanding. And if you apply a little bit of grease, the friction won't destroy the machine, right? But if you don't apply any grace, the machine will burn up. It will break down. You will have to replace parts, which are people in your life. And so you got to understand, if you can apply a little grace into the machine of your life and relationships, it's going to help you a whole lot in your life to maintain long-term relationships. So that's kind of the secret sauce for everything, is grace. The unsettling solution for just about everything is grace. Now, here's the thing. Grace is a great thing, and here's where it kind of comes into play with Christmas, is that grace really is the story of God and sinner reconciled. You know, that's in some Christmas carols, that's in some Christmas songs. That's a true statement. God and sinner reconciled. But here's the thing. You can be right. Let me say it this way. You can be right without being reconciled, can't you? I mean, you can be in an argument and be totally right. Anybody ever been right in an argument? Okay, I feel like I am all the time. That's why I argue, right? And so do you. You wouldn't argue if you didn't think you were right unless you just like to argue. And if you just like to argue, that's a different issue. So we won't even get there. But if you argue a lot, it's probably because you think you're right. But here's the thing. You can be right without being reconciled, without healing that relationship, and it won't do anything. I'm so glad Jesus didn't come to be right. He came to reconcile. Because if he came to be right, we got no hope. We're wrong in a lot of ways. But he came to be reconciled. This is also really important. Grace becomes amazing when it's extended to others. In fact, grace can't really exist without relationship or without you being in relationship with someone else. In fact, grace is really hard to apply to anyone that you don't personally know, right? I mean, you can sort of, in theory, apply it to somebody, and give them some grace or whatever. But if you don't know someone, it's really hard to give them grace. So grace is always important in the context of relationships. And grace, God's amazing grace to you, is an invitation to be amazing to others. It's really important. Now, we're going to look at just one question. It's really unsettling, unfortunately. It might make you squirmy, but it's a question that Jesus poses in one of the Gospels, and it's simply this, found in Matthew chapter 7. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust? Anybody heard this before? Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Pay no attention to the plank in your own eye. And this is a critique of religion, isn't it? It's a critique of religion that seeks to control people, their actions, and what they do and what they don't do based on someone else's thoughts of right and wrong, all that kind of stuff. This is a critique of religion, and that's not what Jesus was about. Why do you look at the speck, the tiny speck of sawdust in your neighbor's eye, in your brother's eye, in somebody else's eye? Why do you look at the little thing that they do that you feel is wrong, and you ignore the giant timber coming out of your face? You know what I mean? And you laugh, and I laugh too, but that's so true. Like, we can all do this, can't we? We can see everybody else's faults 1,000 miles before our own, can't we? It's so easy. It's so easy to be judgmental and to do those things and just look at someone else and be like, if you just took that little thing, you could be able to see clearer while we're smacking them in the head with this the 2x4 sticking out of our face. And it's a funny kind of image, and that is supposed to be funny because Jesus is kind of making a dramatic point here, right? So why do you do that? And I know the answer. And the answer that you might say, and the answer that I've said at times, is probably something like this. It's not a speck of sawdust. In fact, perhaps if you have political opinions, okay? Perhaps if you feel like someone is across the aisle, right, from you. Perhaps you've even thought, that's not sawdust. That's a forest. And that's a problem for me. And I get that. I understand that. But here's another thing that perhaps you might answer with. I don't have a plank in my eye. I don't. I'd know. I'd hit doorways. Things would get in the way. I'd know if there was a plank in my eye. And perhaps it does, and you just don't realize it. That every time you turn around, you smack someone in the face. And you don't realize it. Has anyone in here been around somebody, family or not, names don't need to be mentioned, that when you're around them, you feel them smacking you in the face with the timber hanging out their face? Anybody? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm just, But you know what it feels like to be on the other end of that, don't you? You know what it's like. And sometimes I'm just not aware that I'm doing the same thing, and that's what Jesus is trying to point out to us. See, what's really interesting is you're probably not affected by all these things we're going to put on the screen right now. You're probably not affected by your upbringing, your environment, your experience, your education, your health, your success, your failure, your insecurities, your opportunities, your IQ or your EQ. In fact, some of us don't even know what EQ means based on our IQ, and it's just what it is. We're not affected by these things, huh? These things don't impact our outlook. These things don't impact our worldview or how we treat other people, do they? I think maybe they do, just a little bit. Just a little. If we could just be honest for a moment, I think maybe some of these things impact our lives, how we treat people, how we look at things. Now, here's something else that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7. He says this, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye? Let me take the speck out of your eye. Let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye. Just reiterating the same question. Very unsettling, isn't it? And then he calls us what we tend to be when we do that. You hypocrite. Anybody ever heard that term before? Of course you have. It's the reason you don't like church people, right? Because we're hypocrites, we can't get it right. We can't get it right. You hypocrite. You could also say it like this. You sinner. You fall shorter. You did it on purpose. You did it on purpose over and over. Again and again, and then, wanted forgiveness again and again. He could have said it like that. And here's what I know, and here's what you know, is God was able to take into account that list of things that we put on there, upbringing, environment, all these things. He's able to take into account all those things, and he understands how we ended up in the place that we are, and how we ended up in the mind frame that we are, and how we ended up with the thoughts and the beliefs and the understanding, the world outlook, and all those. He gets all that. And he might even say, you know what, if I grew up in your shoes, I'd probably come to the same conclusions you have. If I experienced what you experienced, I'd probably feel the same way you do. At least to a degree, right? Like if we were to walk someone else's path, we'd probably understand a lot of the decisions they made that we feel are foolish. Right? Anybody in here know anybody foolish? If you walked their path, you may understand some of their decisions which you feel are foolish. And God understands. He knows it all. He sees it all. And I love what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. He says this, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. What I love about this, though, is Paul, living at the time of Jesus, writes this after that, and he actually is not saying this like, while we were still, he literally, when Jesus was on the cross, Paul was sinning. So he means it very literally. While I was still sinning, he could have wrote, Christ died for me. Or perhaps if he were living amongst us today and he was rewriting these words, he might say this, but God demonstrated his own love for us in this, knowing ahead of time the sins we would commit and confess again. Christ died for us anyway. There's a present tense to this. It's not so, it's hard to separate this out. And here's kind of my thinking on this. See, God created time and space, so he exists outside of time and space. So did you know every time he looks at you, in the same moment, he sees Jesus on the cross? That's baffling to me. That's baffling to me. That's a big idea. I don't have time to go all into that today, but I just want you to realize, I want you to know that God knows 100% all the time the sacrifice he's made for each of us, and he chooses us every time. Romans 5:8, actually this is Luke. He says this, he continues. He says, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So it's a first, let's take this giant thing out, and then I'll be able to see that tiny speck and help you get that out if I need to. Here's what we need to get from this verse and from this very unsettling question, is that planks get in the way of grace. Planks get in the way of grace. And so the question, I guess, I'm going to kind of shorten Jesus' question to really short, not as good, not as powerful, because his is really good. I'm going to shorten it for you, and I'm just going to ask you this. Got planks? Got any planks? Got any planks? Got any planks? How could you even see the speck in someone else's eyes when you've been smacking people in the face with your own planks? Right? I'm not immune. I'm preaching to me too, okay? So this is not like this is like so I am also uneasy about this. Got planks? Got planks? Here's what I know. The more aware I am of what God has yet to do in me, the less aware I am of what he has yet to do in you. And why am I so focused on you anyways? See, what I love about Jesus, I love a lot of things about Jesus, but one of the things I love is that he didn't come to take sides. He didn't come to take sides. A lot of us feel like, I don't know. You ever seen the two football teams or players or whatever, opposite teams, and they're both praying at the beginning of the game, and they're both saying, like, God, just be with me, and let's win. And you're kind of like, okay, but, is he like choosing your team over the other? I don't think he really cares that much about the teams, okay? There's bigger things going on. You may care about the teams, and that's fine, but I don't think it matters that much to him. And so he didn't come to take sides, okay? So he's not like a Raiders fan or a Rams fan or whatever. He's just a fan of us, of people, of individuals. He loves all of us equally and wants us all to win, not necessarily in sports, but in life and in relationships and in loving other people and being gracious to other people. He wants us to win at these things. He wants you to win. So he knows that your life will be enriched and you will enrich other people's lives by those things. So Jesus didn't come to take sides, but he came alongside. He came alongside people to cheer them on, to love them, to be there for them, to sacrifice his life for them. Now, there was a group of people that he had a hard time coming alongside. And these were the people who had giant planks in their eyes all the time. They were called the Pharisees. It was a religious group that somehow always went back to religion instead of relationship. And they always looked at other people and what they were doing wrong instead of looking at Jesus and saying, teach me, how could I do this better? Now, Jesus was great because he was, and we've said this for the last couple of weeks, he was full of grace and truth. Not the balance of grace and truth, full of grace and truth. In fact, we've said that he called sin, and sinners, sinners. And then he would say, hey, sinner, come follow me. You don't have to be perfect. Come follow me. I love you. I want a relationship with you. And we read a couple of stories where he certainly showed that to different people in his context who were like the biggest sinners of his time, the people that no one wanted anything to do with, who thought they had a relationship with God. He went to those people and said, I want a relationship with you. You are that important. These other people have it wrong. I love you. And he wanted to spend time with them. So here's the question I think we need to think about. If Jesus is full of grace and truth, what are you full of? That's a difficult question. You may come up with a different answer. If you're looking at someone else, you're probably saying they're full of something. But again, it's not about someone else. It's about you. We're trying to take responsibility for our own life, not someone else's life. So what are you full of? And I guess for those of us who call Two Cities our home, what are we full of? Are we full of grace? Love for others? There's always room for improvement, isn't there? There always is. See, the church is most appealing when grace is most apparent. Some of you have experienced grace, and you know what it feels like, and you know you don't deserve it, and you know you don't earn it, and you're so thankful for it. And if you're wondering what that's like, you should pray about that and ask God to show you, because it's amazing. It's amazing grace. See, grace is the unsettling solution for just about everything, as we've said, over and over and over again. It's the oil in the machine. It's the thing that makes things happen. It's the thing that keeps things from being blown up and destroyed in relationships and everything. So this Christmas season, okay, it's coming up fast. Are you ready for that? I mean, have you decorated your houses? No. Okay. Scrooges. Have you looked at houses that are decorated? That's what we did. We went and looked at houses that were decorated the other night. And I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome to go down these streets. All the lights and everything, it's fantastic. But what I want you to know, as you prepare your homes, as you prepare gifts for people, as you prepare for parties, and you prepare for family gatherings and all those sorts of things, I want you to think about, and I want you to really try to focus in on this idea. Are you ready for the season? And the season is really about grace. Jesus, Son of God, became a man so that men could become sons of God. That's C.S. Lewis. Think about that. That's incredible. That's incredible. But the sons of God should be grace dispensers because they've experienced it. They know it. It's in their bones. It's part of them. And if you're holding back on grace, you need to understand something. You only have to forgive other people. You only have to show grace to other people as much as God has to you. For me, that's a lot. So I don't know about you, but I got no excuse. I have to show grace. So this season, what I want you to think about is let's do this. Let's give someone what they don't expect and what they don't necessarily deserve. Let's give them grace. Amazing grace. In fact, when you give grace, you will be amazing, just as God's grace is for you. Grace. It's the unsettling solution for just about everything. If you don't believe me, try it. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for showing grace to us. We thank you so much for loving us so incredibly much that you would sacrifice your own Son for our sake. Father, I don't know anybody who would do that except you. I'm so thankful for it. As we have opportunity this Christmas season, as we have opportunity in gatherings and parties and work things and functions and places we go and people we see and parking lots and stores and in lines, God, I pray that you would give us the nudge to show grace to others in this time. Help it be so dramatic that people ask us, why? And we can simply point back to you and say, because God gave me grace beyond measure, I must give it. Help us to be those kinds of people, that kind of a church. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. I hope to see you back with your families for Jingle Jam next week or our Christmas service in 2 weeks.